First, I'm going to ask if there are any resident comments or questions not related to the matter that's before us. No comments or questions about other matters? Great. So now we'll continue to hear the application of SEB Weston Village LLC, 165 Chestnut Hill Avenue, number 2, Brighton, Mass, as to 255 Miriam Street, map 7, lot 70, and 11 Hallett Hill Road, map 7, lot 125, requesting a comprehensive permit under Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, for 10 housing units, 2 of which will be affordable on 2.95 acres. I'll try to speak up. So the board members, you can see our names, but I think most of you have been to several of our sessions. And Ilana Quirk on my left is town council, and Noreen Stockman is our administrator. The agenda I had thought would be, at least at the conclusion of the last session, we were going to discuss whether structures could be pulled away from the lot line to protect abutters' trees and for added screening. And then we were going to hear neighbor comments. Should we still proceed with that agenda? So if petitioner would like to discuss plans?
People can hear. Bob Engler of SEB for the petitioner. My son Jeff usually handles these, but he's not here tonight. I just want to comment that Alan and the board asked us the last time to take a hard look at some of the issues around the retaining wall and some of the units, see what we could do, and we gave an extension to come back and do that, which we have done. We took it seriously, and we've made some substantial corrections, we believe, and it's been looked at by the consultants for the board, Rob and Nelson, and our own team, that they can comment on. So I just want to indicate, we're going to show the slides of what it looks like. If the projector's working, and our team can do that. We'll turn it over to Carlos and Gigi and Barbara to talk about these particular changes.
Do we have a projector?
Yes, it's in the ceiling.
And it's going to project that way? Okay.
It's on, I think.
Where is this projector?
Yes.
Laptop?
Oh, sure.
Bob?
The laptop is what projector?
We set up, where you set it up?
Over there.
Yeah, that's it. Do you have a projector? You haven't turned on the projector?
I have no idea. I actually haven't used it before, but it
Oh,
should
okay.
be.
I have boards in my car. I can grab those.
Does the projector need to be turned on?
No, I think on a Windows machine, you know how to turn on the external screen?
That may be just
On a Windows machine?
if you go to properties, or there's also
This is so beyond anything that's
settings here somewhere. Usually there's a little icon. But I don't know if this is turned on.
It's got a red light.
If that's on
Can you use
standby.
settings?
Let's see if I can standby.
Whose machine is this?
There, it's on that.
John, if you're tall.
It looks fine.
Okay, there you go, perfect. Yeah, that.
Oh, there it is.
Can we shift these on for?
I don't know. I've never been in this room.
Just don't even get it down.
Are there more
I'm just wondering if
chairs?
there are more, where are the chairs?
There's one here.
There's one here and one here.
There's two more here.
Two here.
Alan.
I mean, accommodations for
Oh, there's more chairs in the.
Go to the library, they got a twice this size and baby production. Or the rec center.
I've gathered all these.
Go over to the field school, brand new.
I guess so, if we can't.
I'll
check
get
that.
into it if everybody can see this all right.
No. No, yeah, realistically,
So,
we should
we
do
can
something
move the
about.
chairs back.
That's what
How
I was
about if
thinking.
if everyone just move, I mean, I don't know what the fire laws are.
I don't see
Why have accommodations been made for this? We knew there were gonna be 80 or 90 people here. Half the people weren't even in the room. I mean, this should have been thought if you knew
You
this
can
was
talk
gonna
to
be
the
run.
town manager.
Yes, the town
We
manager.
had nothing to do with that.
Well, we have a library we could use, the field school we could use, the rec center we could use. I mean, this isn't fair.
So if you could all just move your seats 2 feet this way,
Is that gonna accommodate
that might help.
You're getting more chairs for people in the back. Yeah, there are more chairs down front, if people want to sit.
Well, it's 7:10, so I don't know that 30 more people are coming. So maybe we can all,
There's some seats over here.
town manager just left? Can you get her on the phone and make other accommodations?
So if you guys could just move your seats 2 feet that way, then people in the
They're all
front.
hooked together.
they're all hooked
Or
together.
down the road. It's okay, just,
Stand up and do. All right.
And the
So
problem
with
is,
consideration
it's been
for
advertised
the
here.
request for the shifting of the buildings, or the shifting of all the structures away from the property line, we took building 4 here and we moved it over about 2.5 feet further away from the property line. So at this point now, all 4 of these buildings that are along the southerly property line are no closer than 20 feet. 2 of the buildings are actually fully outside the setback along the property line. So that was an improvement for the building itself, and then along with that, we also took a look at this retaining wall, which is subject to a lot of discussion. The closer segment that used to be 2 feet from the property line here has now been shifted so that the retaining wall is no closer than 10 feet from the southerly property line along the entire edge here. So it's a uniform width along this edge.
So you're not jogging it in anymore? Because there used to be like a little
We are
jog.
not. No. So that's fully gone. I used to cut in here and then run closer to the property line there. So now everything's been pushed back, so it's no closer than 10 feet from the property line, with the excavation behind it essentially being a limit of work or a limit of grading there, being no closer than 8 feet from that property line. So in conjunction with that, we also took a look at how that would impact the aesthetics and the use here of this building. What we've also done is introduce a small seat wall along the edge of the patio here, which allows for a stepped effect. So at that point, you're not looking at as much of a uniform wall. You're allowed to landscape it and essentially improve the visual appeal from the building side as well. So there's no real negative impact on the building.
What's the distance from the edge of the house on 4A to the wall?
So it's 10 feet to the back of the wall, which would translate to roughly 8 feet to the face of the wall.
No, I mean between the house and the house and the wall.
Correct, so it's about 8 feet.
Oh,
So
8
I'll-
feet.
We have another slide here. So we developed this section to clarify the situation here, to provide a little bit of detail. So now what we've done is made it so that this limit of work line here is no closer than 8 feet from the property line. And you have about 8 feet from the building to the face of the wall here, which will be landscape, bushes and shrubs, small landscaping that allows the screening of that wall from the development side.
And the wall is how high?
The wall varies. At that point, it's between about 2 feet roughly here to about 4.5 feet roughly here. And then as you step down at the highest point, it's 6 feet and then decreases again as you come back around.
Wait,
can you
the
do
highest
that
is 6
again?
feet or 4?
6 feet.
Start again? Where is it started to?
So it's 0 right here at the end. It's about 2 feet here. And then it raises grade because the existing grade along the property line slopes up, so it essentially matches the grade. So it increases to a 4.5 foot height here because you have a 2 foot smaller wall here. as you step down from that wall, the effective height is 6 feet from the low side. And then from that point, it decreases in height as you go further to the east and around the corner. Where it eventually
Can you
becomes
do the
zero.
decrease though? Step it up for us?
Yeah, so at this point it's 6 feet. At this point, you're about 4.5 feet. At this point, again, 4.5 feet, and then it decreases from here 2 feet, and then it's flush at the end. So with those changes, there's a great improvement to the treatment and the undisturbed area along the property line there. It's a benefit to the trees, and it also doesn't negatively impact the units. The setback of all the buildings from the property line now is no closer than 20 feet. So it's just 2 of those buildings now that are within the setback for the property line there. I'll turn it over to Gigi to talk a little bit about the landscaping that's been revised.
One second. Would it be 3A and 4A that are now 20 feet?
3A was always in excess of 20 feet from the property line. I think it was just over. And 4A now is exactly 20 feet from the property line.
Okay, so 3A has not moved.
Correct.
Okay.
3A was always 20 feet, or
Okay.
just a shade over. 4A will now be set at 20 feet from the property line.
Can you all hear?
No.
You have to try to, this is really,
Would you like me to do it again louder?
Maureen, is there any amplification at all in the town, a portable mic anywhere that we could get?
Not that I know of. I asked and they didn't have them hooked up for this room.
so, all right.
Gonna have to
Then maybe, yeah, you have to yell
Stand
or
down in the middle.
stand in the middle.
Do it briefly.
So we had to
Put down the card a little bit.
To recap, so what we've done is shifted unit 4A so that it's 20 feet from the property line. So that was an increase of about 2.5 feet from where it was previously located. And we've also removed the jog and the fence where it used to run along the property line to the point where now it's uniformly 10 feet from the property line along this entire edge. And the height of the wall has decreased a little bit relative to what it was before because the natural grade slopes into the site. So the top of the wall doesn't have to go as high. So that the wall increases at this point from essentially 0 feet at the edge to about 2 feet here. 4.5 feet, give or take, along this edge. 6 feet right at this point. Back down 4.5 feet, continues at 4.5 feet, and then transitions back down to being flush at this point. With that, we've also introduced a small seat wall along the back of the unit here, which will allow landscaping to be planted.
A little louder, please.
It will allow landscaping to be planted in this small raised planter area, which will be about 2 feet high, which will allow the visual effect of the wall from the development side to be more appealing because it will be screened by the landscaping that's in that area. So now at this point, the limit of work or the limit of grading in order to construct the wall and all the site improvements will be no closer than 8 feet from the property line along this southerly edge here. So with those improvements, we believe that's a great impact in the positive way to the development. It's going to help the longevity of the trees, and also it's also going to help the project from a buffer standpoint as well. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. Otherwise, we turn it over to the landscape architect.
Yeah, there are more seats in the front here. If you're in the back and you want to come up, there are seats over here.
I'd rather do the presentation
Yeah.
before we take questions.
Yeah.
It does not.
You know, let's not do questions.
We'll turn it over to the landscape architect and we can answer questions afterwards.
Yeah, let's do the presentation first and then.
If you're out in the hall and you want to come in, there are seats in here.
There's one over here.
There are 2 seats up here, and we can move more down, more seats in here. So I think there's one here, one there.
Well, you're sitting in one.
Oh, so I'm in the corner. And we can move more seats over here.
If anybody wants to come, we could probably.
Do you people who are in the hall want to come in? No? Okay.
So the
the shift in the wall allows for more undisturbed soil volume for the existing trees that are being retained along the property line. I will let Barbara Keeney, our consulting arborist, talk about that in just a minute. I just wanted to cover the planting, the new planting portion of it. Couple things about this. The shift in the retaining wall location creates this consistent edge at the site perimeter with room for planting now on top of the wall. Previously, the planting space was behind 3 and A, was at a lower level, was at the level of the units. Now that planting zone is up higher, which just means that the shrub layer that we're proposing there is essentially a more effective buffer and faster because it's elevated. The limit of grading that Carlos was talking about, what's excluded from that is proposed planting and the property line fence that's been proposed. The planting is, we've really reduced the number of trees proposed for that location. It's now more shrub material and about 3 or 4 trees in that whole zone. And the locations of those plantings has to all be verified during construction based on the process of locating structural roots of the existing trees. So you see on the note, it's a little fuzzy, but the note on the upper right-hand corner that we will not be digging plant pits where there are structural roots of existing trees. So, and then in addition, typically it's industry standard that a planting hole for a tree or a shrub is 2 to 3 times the diameter of the root ball. We're saying 1.5 times the size, so we will keep these really at a minimum. And a lot of the shrubs that are proposed along here are things like rhododendron maximum, which actually have a very shallow root ball. And so we will not be excavating any deeper than the depth of the root ball. So we won't be taking any additional space with that. You realize the deer are going to eat all those rhododendrons. There's over 40 deer in this neighborhood.
Can we finish, please, before you?
I will let Barbara speak a little bit about the root situation in that.
Can you point out where the fence is?
The fence is along the property line.
The entire,
It
you
runs, yeah, it runs from what is at the top here all the way down to about, ends right about here.
and it goes up and over to the left?
No, it's just along that side. And it will have to, you see, we've noted it, but there is one, potentially 2 locations where we will stop the fence and restart it because of the trees that are actually on the property line. We don't want to interfere with those.
Okay, so Carlos and Gigi both mentioned that the expanded area with the 8-foot setback provides significant more soil volume for the existing roots. Prior to the construction of the wall, the trenches would be air spaded with a supersonic air jet stream to do exploratory work to locate the structural roots. The roots will be slightly cut back from that 8-foot distance to give them enough room to regenerate. So that increased soil volume allows more room for the existing roots to retain and more space for the roots to regenerate.
Is that it?
Yeah. Any questions?
Yes, I do. So, have you identified the number of trees that will be impacted by, will you know, or do you know, how many trees will be impacted by having to cut back roots?
Yes, it was on the assessment that we did.
Oh,
So we
okay.
identified
That stays the
trees
same,
were-
that assessment?
That stays the same, yes.
Same trees?
Same trees.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do we have a schematic with the existing trees that are going to be affected? Because you only have the new trees that you're planting. That's number question number 1. Question number 2 is,
as I said, there's 40, a herd of over 40 deer in the neighborhood. Roadies don't live here. If you walk around the neighborhood, most of them are eaten down. So, you know, you might want to rethink putting rhododendrons in here as a buffer because they're not going to stay. Number one. Number two, I'd love to see those trees that you mentioned on a schematic, because saying that they're in a plan somewhere, in a written plan, isn't helpful.
Show the assessment map.
We do have this assessment map that relates to the report that I did. So each tree is numbered and it corresponds to the report that was submitted to the zoning board.
It doesn't reflect the old wall location though, so look at that.
But the tree location
This is
remains the same.
this is just a key map for the trees.
So it doesn't change what's happening to the number of trees taken down or left up?
No, all the trees will remain.
Okay. Wait, when you say all the trees will remain, you mean all the?
All the property line trees will remain.
And this shows all the abutter trees?
Not all the
Property line-
other trees.
property
The
line
trees
trees.
that, when we did the assessment, we selected trees that would be impacted by the construction. So there's a formulation of tree protection using the critical root zone, which Dr. Haber presented last week. There's the tree canopy method. And those are all baseline measurements. But if you take those measurements and apply those to the field, there would never be any development. So what happens at that point is a tree mitigation program is put in place. So we balance the impacts with the mitigation approach to preserve the trees, which we've incorporated into our report to the board.
If you want to apply your mitigation program, do you have to go onto the neighboring properties, or can it all be done from this property?
We can do all the mitigation from this property. It would be better and more expansive if we could get on the other side of the trees to get the full root zone. If
For things like
that's
water and
permissible
other.
for watering, yeah.
But,
If
yeah,
allowed,
but you
yes.
don't have to. It's-
Yes, that would be ideal.
Can I just ask, I'm not that familiar with this, what's the red squiggles?
So those are woodland areas where we identified, the species composition in those woodlands. And that entire woodland is protected by a proposed tree protection fence that will go all along the perimeter. Will come around here and down this property line. So those trees will be preserved. They range in sizes from 4 to 22 inches in diameter.
I'm not clear, are you putting in plantings on the abutter side of the wall?
Not on the abutter side of the property line, but yes, on the upper side of the wall, between the wall and the property line, yes.
So that is.
But not across the property line on the abutter's
Right,
property.
this is all on the
Yeah, that's all within the property.
project area.
Okay, so these are all new plantings, the circles that you have?
Some of those circles are representative of existing trees. The ones that have, again, it's hard to distinguish what they're, but the letters on them that identify what type of tree it is, those, for example, are all new trees or shrubs. Obviously, the smaller couple sizes of circles are shrubs. And again, in that upper area there, at the higher elevation above the wall, I think we only have 4 trees proposed for there now. The rest are all shrubs.
And how high will the shrubs grow?
Those max out at, things like the Ilex mesorbay max out at 12 feet, 15 feet. Things like rhododendrons are highly variable. I mean, they can be 30 feet, but that's over a long period of time, so. But they'll be going in at the things that are shown with the shrub symbol, it's the larger symbol, goes in at 4 to 5 foot height, and the smaller circles go in at probably about 36 inches.
What is the wall made of? Is it cement, is it fieldstone, what is it?
So the wall would be made out of essentially a gravity block wall. So it's just large blocks that sit on top of each
Like
other.
on a highway?
No, not like
Do you have an actual photograph of them though? I
We
mean, that's-
provided them as part of previous submissions. They do have a textured facade, so they are made with this type of a use in mind, so it's not the monstrous blocks.
Right, but they're still industrial.
They'll be facing the
Actually,
development.
you won't, the neighbors won't see the wall.
Right.
Those face the,
From
Yeah.
the neighbor's
Yeah.
perspective, everything is below ground, so we're not building a wall up above ground.
Okay.
Everything is in a cut scenario,
All
so
right.
any sort of exposed space on the wall will be seen entirely from the
and there's
residential.
the fence, and there's a
But
fence
the
on top of
neighbors
it.
will see the fence.
They will
And
see
what
the
does that
along
fence
the
look
property
like?
line.
Yeah, what is it made of?
That's a wood fence, a wood privacy fence. It's, we had the pictures of it in previous submissions. It's not stockade, it's a little bit more refined than a stockade, but it is a vertical wood boards with a wood cap on it.
And with the condo association, we have to take care of that fence over time. So we know what the condo fees are to be able to do that for the people that are in the housing, there's 40,000 and below.
I don't know,
Because
Bob,
fencing
whether
can
there's.
be a huge expense,
Mhm.
especially with wood.
Out of the condo association.
Do you know how you're gonna support the fence? How deep is the hole?
Usually the holes are about 3 feet.
3 feet?
But they're done with a post digger, so they're typically not very big around.
How close to the property line?
It's going to be, we call it a property line fence. You always err 4 to 6 inches inward of the property line to make sure that, you flag the property line at the time of construction, and you always err a little bit on your property.
How
it's
many
in
holes
a-
will be dug along that property line?
I haven't counted. The panels would be probably 8-foot panels.
So maybe 15, 10, 15 maybe holes?
What's the? Yeah, I don't.
And I think certainly
Run.
consideration would be given for any trees and roots that are in the way, so there is some variability on where it goes, but it would be entirely on the property, on the private property side.
What's the color of the fence? What do you?
We, at this time, have proposed a red cedar fence that would just gray out. And that takes a couple of years for it to go from being a kind of newish look to cedar gray.
Chairman Lee?
Yes.
I'm Attorney Steve Gard, here on behalf of Walter Sullivan for some of the neighbors. I have a question for the arborist. I could not tell from the slide as to exactly how many trees would potentially be impacted by the work being done on the property. I saw numbers as high as 30, but understand that some of those have
Yes, some of them are
vegetated
individual.
area implications. Do you have a number?
Yes, I do. Some of them are individual trees and some of them are groupings of trees. So let me just go to my inventory here.
How do you spell your last name, sir?
Guard from Norwell, Massachusetts. I work with Walter Sullivan of Sullivan and Comerford.
Thank you.
Well,
So there's 33 entries. When we showed the woodland areas, they comprised of trees, like up to 40, 45 trees in the woodland areas. But the individual entries, I have 33.
okay, so I understand we've already gone over the trees that will be impacted by the excavation to install the retaining wall by cutting the root systems back.
For regeneration, yes.
Yeah, I understand that. And what impact will the other trees have as a result of the proposed construction as well? Will their root
The other-
systems be impacted? Will it be a health issue for the tree?
Yes, all of the trees will be, all of the excavation, limited excavation, all the trees will be, roots will be pruned during the construction process. There'll be an arborist on site, so all the trees will be pruned.
What is the
by an
potential
arborist.
negative impact to these trees as a result of pruning back the root system?
With the mitigation plan that we put in place, we feel strongly that there will be, that the trees will be able to tolerate the level of impact.
And what is the mitigation plan? Forgive me, I'm not an arborist. so-
Okay, the mitigation plan involves a several-step
Yeah,
process.
we've spent a lot of time talking about this.
Oh, I understand. I understand that.
It's in writing,
Yeah.
yeah.
I understand that, but I think it's a fair question, given that, the number of trees wasn't identified a few minutes ago, that concerned me. I think it's
No,
important
but it
that everybody
was,
knows.
it's a submission that's been.
No, it wasn't.
Well,
Yes,
it's
it was.
it's
You
an
weren't
earlier
here.
submission.
It was a prior
I
session.
understand that, but
Where-
again,
So maybe
I'm
you can just
asking a question
summarize.
as to
It's already been answered.
It's-
what's going to impact these
I
trees.
don't,
My clients live
we
next
can't
door.
start
These trees
from the beginning
are a very
because he's
important
just
part of
showing up
my
now.
client's interest in the development of this project.
Okay.
So I'm just asking to understand how these trees will impact.
Okay, well, let me just go over the process that we proposed and then.
You don't have to, ma'am, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. It's my understanding that you have already done that, and I appreciate that. Just wanted to ask for the record how many trees would be impacted by the excavation that was being done. Thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to know where the water is going to come from to water these trees and plants, and the extra bathrooms and sinks and so forth, since we're supposedly in year 3 of a 15-year drought, and you can already see that the town green is sinking.
We're proposing water trucks in our watering plant.
I know, but I understand that there's a business water going on in some towns around us between private homeowners and communities with tankfuls of water that are being brought in from the west.
Well, it's, we,
And how many years would you supply water to these plants and trees?
the proposed treatment plan can extend up from 3 to 5 years.
And then does that fall on the condo association?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
So what, will an escrow account be established to hold that money?
Hold what money?
What money?
Which money?
An annual cost.
It's a condo.
To pay for the water?
It's a condo.
How will the condo be set up is a big question.
And the condo association says no.
It's a condo association.
Right.
It's part of the, it'll be conditioned.
What's the question?
Somebody back here had a.
It's about the condo
I
association.
have a question to go back to the retaining wall and the trees. It's a two-part question. My understanding from previous meetings was that the purpose of moving in the wall was to increase for visual buffering. And it sounds like the trees, there are fewer trees, more shrubs, so maybe that overall would lead to less visual buffering. My other concern was that the chairman of the committee asked, would the safety of the neighbor trees be guaranteed? And we never got a yes or no answer on that.
Okay, she answered that.
Yeah, I felt like we
Could
got
you,
off
could you
topic.
speak to
Could you
that
say
again?
yes, you could guarantee that the trees, the large neighbor trees will not be
You
there.
can't guarantee anything.
Yeah, we can't guarantee, but we have a mitigation plan in place, and we have, we feel comfortable that the trees that we have identified that will be impacted by the construction can tolerate the level of construction.
I guess we just wanted to hear
Yes.
guarantee or not
Yes.
guarantee, and that was it. And then the bit about, so do you feel that like the amount of like leaf matter and stuff is the same with shrubs as trees, or what's the difference?
Well, the shrub, we're putting shrubs in that get of pretty good size, knowing that there's been an interest in reducing the number of trees because their installation, they have a bigger ball that gets installed. So in trying to allow more flexibility to work around the structural roots that are existing, we're planting more shrubs than trees. But because everybody would like a visual buffer there, that's why we're proposing things, shrubs that get 12, 15 feet as opposed to shrubs that stay 3 feet high or so. So we're trying to balance the aesthetic wishes of everybody, but also the health of the existing trees.
Gigi, you had a slide at one point that showed what a neighbor would see. It was sort of an elevation thing, so you saw, say, a new house, and then you would see, this is the top of the wall, and this is how high the trees would be, and then this is what a neighbor would see. Do you remember that slide?
There were a series of, it was one of the sections, a series of
It was
sections.
a section,
Yeah, that
yeah.
had the
And I'm
architecture
trying
done.
to remember how much of the house, the new house, would be seen and then be screened. Do you remember you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, and that was sad, the architect had done those sections.
Oh, okay.
But But to that point, that's one of the reasons why we see an aesthetic benefit to this new wall location, because it's allowing us to get the shrubs to begin with up higher. So instead of having everything starting down at the lower level, down at this level down here and waiting for it to come up, we're already starting up a little higher, so it's giving everybody a little bit of a leg up. But
Makes sense.
yes, there is, when you look at trees in groupings, existing trees in groupings, and for anybody who's been on this site or in any wooded site, you don't have a lot of foliage on existing trees down low. It's all phototropic, it's all up looking for the light. So we're wanting to reestablish some lower layers so that it isn't just a buffer, it doesn't count as a buffer if it's just a pom-pom in the sky. So we're wanting to create that lower level of plant.
In the back?
Yeah, I just have a question in terms of the, and I don't know if we had posted this to you, and I might have missed it because I missed one of the meetings. What is the proposed timetable for all this to happen? Meaning, I don't know if we're selling, these houses are being built, or kind of being built one-off when they're sold, or, all at one time, or when's all the planting going to happen, I suppose?
Very difficult to say the time frame because we have a neighborhood lawsuit pending, at least that's what I've heard. So who knows when that'll be and when we'll build, so we have no time frame.
No, I'm not asking when you build, I'm wondering when you start building.
When we start building,
What your plan will be in terms of when
well,
does it all go in?
they'll be in as we move through the site with our housing, and we'll be
What
selling
does that
based on
mean?
the market.
Sorry.
When will that be what?
What does that mean in terms of?
Time period.
Well, they won't all be built the first day, if that's the question. They will be built as the site gets developed. The roads will go in, the units will be, foundations will start going in.
So it could all
one
be
at a time.
bare for if you don't sell right away, it could be bare for a
will
couple
be
of years. It could be bare for, however long it
It could
takes
be
you.
bare for life, it could be bare not at all if we sell right away as we expect to, but I don't know when that'll be.
I think the
Bob, I don't
question is-
remember you having a phasing plan. This isn't a phase.
No, but you don't build all 10 units on the same day.
You're not putting all 10 foundations in at the same
No,
time.
well, I don't know that.
But does that mean all the admin's gonna come in at the end?
We don't want it prolonged over 5 or 6 years, that's the issue.
Yeah, I think that's a question. Once you start, how long do you think it will
A
take?
year.
A year to do
all
the whole,
the units?
Call it 14 months.
yeah, to build all the 10 houses?
Probably.
And how does the condo
Yep.
association start up if you sell to one person? And what's the responsibility if you just have 2 units that have sold?
The
And you've got all the
developer,
property to deal with in terms
the
of.
developer
why
has the responsibility for all the unsold units, so they pay for all the condo association until it's gradually moved into 75% sold. and we'll get a new
14
vote.
minutes instead of minutes.
To answer your question about planting, the planting does happen very much at the end.
So it will all be bare until all the houses are built.
Well, the planting, what we don't want to do is put plants in that then get run over. So the planting
We
tends,
don't want our kids running over. I'm
The-
sorry, I
right.
just had to say that, given there are going to be so many trucks that are going to be moving.
okay, I'm trying to answer your question
I know,
about
I'm
the
sorry
planting,
about that.
there's the plants and the soil that the plants go into can't be, you can't have equipment going on it after that soil has been prepared and everything, so it is
That makes sense.
really the last
So
step.
there's no way to tell or plan for how much equipment's going to be coming through at any given time.
I definitely don't know the
Unlike
answer
the
to that.
project that's happening right now in Silver Hill, where we're having everything, where the town's been so great about letting us know when things are gonna happen there, so that the bus drivers know and the families know and the kids know. And it's still a little bit chaotic, even though it's fabulous and everyone can serve, we're not gonna know when this is gonna happen.
Well, as we get closer to that point, we'll be able to indicate where we are, but we don't, not at this point. It's too early.
So, last time we asked you to take a look at this, and you agreed to take a hard look at it. And if we wind the clock back 7 months ago, we asked you to take a look at 6A and 5A. And you pushed 6A, off the property line, you got rid of a wall next to 6A, and you reoriented 5A, you moved 5A in from the property line. And when Jeff came in at that point, he said, this is an improvement. It's better. And it was better with respect to the setbacks. Also, which was one of our principal concerns at that time. And now you've gone back and you've taken a look at 4A and 3A and the retaining wall. and you started off your remarks tonight by saying, this is an improvement. And it's better with respect to the setbacks, which is what I voiced to you as one of my concerns about one of the key waivers in my mind that you've asked us for. And so my question now is, with respect to 7C, 8A, 9A, 10B to a de minimis amount, but also with respect to 3A, 4A, and it looks like the easterly side of 6A, you're still within the setbacks, and you're asking for a waiver, as you're entitled to do. But why, if we move units in more, won't the project be improved? And why can't we fully respect the setbacks? And it's not my intention to do the balancing test, and I tried to, choose my words carefully with Jeff and with you at the last meeting. But no question that the setbacks are a local concern. We don't have to do the balancing here now about the need for affordable housing, but why can't we move units in more and still achieve what you're trying to achieve on the site?
We gave up, by moving one of them in, we gave up some significant backyard on what we did, so there's already a loss of value on that unit. Between Carlos and the architects, they have looked at this site 7 ways to Sunday, and we can't move those units in anymore, I believe, of what we have, because of the slopes and everything else, they work. And so that's the answer, that we can't do any more than what you have in front of you right now.
Change the unit. Real simple.
So you're convinced that you've reached an absolute...
Yes, we are. We're convinced that what we've given you works, we're comfortable with it, and we think you have enough information to vote on this project with what you have.
Is it an economic issue?
A physical issue, really, of moving the units around so they work.
Well, why, unless the project is rendered uneconomic, are you relieved from having to meet the setback limits?
Because we need the units. So it is ultimately an economic issue.
So it is an economic issue?
Yeah.
So you're saying that in order to get any additional units within the setback, you're running into a condition that renders the project uneconomic?
If we have to lose a unit, absolutely.
Well, but
Right, but that's sort of begging the question, right? Because,
No, the question is...
if you, just take for example 4A, since that's one of the ones that you just worked on.
Yeah.
Could you put the schematic up of the units while he's talking?
Put up the layout and materials plan.
So we just have a portion of it, but
C3.
there's
You don't have one of all the
C3.
units?
Yeah, you do, you have to post.
The full-size one with the trees that all.
Oh, yeah, that's that number of the units on it. Great. That doesn't have the unit numbers on it, which that's more or less what they before.
He can point to it if you could.
Do you have the sheets that you submitted to us this week? And
We could reference that.
We don't have-
Point to the screen.
Somebody can point while he's talking.
Yeah, someone.
well, anyway, 4A is on 4A is on the other one anyway. I guess if you push 4A in so that it's 25 feet off that property line, why isn't that an improvement with respect to the 25-foot setback? And why, do you have an argument about why it renders the project uneconomic to push that back to 25 feet?
I can speak to why it's not, it would be a detriment to the project. If we start moving this building further away from the property line, all of a sudden, this building is going to be obscured by this one creeping in, so you lose sight lines and the good feel that you get from that unit. So that would make that more unappealing. If we start, pulling these into, you're losing front yards for these units, and you end up being close on the road, so that would be a detriment.
do you need a certain distance for your driveway?
You want it to be at least 20 feet long, so a car can park in it. And then as far as some of the other concerns that you touched on, as it related to, shifting buildings further away from the property lines here, if we start squeezing all the buildings together, they end up being too close to each other, and at that point, it doesn't feel good from the residents' perspective. Well,
What
that
about
significantly
utilities?
affects the value of the house if people don't want to live in it.
What about the utilities?
4-foot front yard or
So
the
the
front yard.
utilities as well. So as we start squeezing things into the center of the site, the utilities are all located in these central locations in between the units. If we start squeezing the buildings further or closer together, they end up getting closer to the utilities as well. There's certain setbacks that we have to keep. It's required by state bylaw. So if we do start squeezing even more than what we have shown here, the properties lose a significant amount of value, and you probably would have to lose some to make it work.
Well, at what point do you have to lose a unit?
I think we're at that point now.
We're
It's
at the
possible.
point now where you have the plan. You're not telling you your job, but you gotta vote what's in front of you. You're not gonna redesign it, because we're not redesigning it anymore. This is what, the best we can do is what you have now, with what we've figured around to make it work for us and work in the best way possible, and that's the plan. So it either gets voted up or down.
But don't you either have to comply with the setback requirement or demonstrate that compliance with the setback requirement would render the project uneconomic?
No, I don't think
Well,
that's
there are
correct.
two issues with that. If you don't give us a setback, so the plan that we've given you doesn't work, then it becomes uneconomic. If you lose a unit, it becomes uneconomic. So that's the reason that the waivers are there, to support the plan you have in front of you. If you just said, we wanted 2 sidewalks and you have 1, but nothing else changed, we'd look at the economics of that and say, can we afford it or not? We're not asking for that. We're asking for things that make the placement of those units work. And that makes the site work, and that makes the 10 units work.
And you're saying that with respect to the setbacks, that you're not willing to revisit the issue anymore, that this is the best that you can do?
That's correct.
So, Al, I think that our town council might want to comment on the process.
Right, I think that the question now is as to lot 4A specifically, that it's now 20 feet back from the lot line, and the question is, the applicable setback is 25 feet, and the question I think that's being asked is, why can't it be moved another 5 feet away from the property line? And if the issue is that you say that that would render the project uneconomic, and if the board wants to insist upon the condition that it's a local concern to have that buffer, to have that 25-foot buffer in that location, the question would be for you to give a pro forma to indicate why you can't do that additional 5 feet to comply with the 25-foot setback.
That's
and
what
then
I'm-
and then have that reviewed. I
Because
think that's
this
what you're
is-
asking.
That's what I'm asking, not as artfully as you just put it, but that's what I'm asking.
What we're saying is, we gave an extension of a month to give you these plans. There is no time for us to do any more pro forma review, because this is the end of the period. We've been through it now for 7 months. We don't consider.
So are we.
So have you. And frankly, we don't consider any of the issues that the neighbors are very concerned about, which I understand, I'm sensitive to that. From a 40B point of view, your balancing test, those are not health and safety issues that rise to the level when a town is 3% affordable. So that balancing test is in our favor totally for the last, once we handle the traffic and the water and the wastewater and all the health and safety issues, and have 10 units on 2.8 acres, which at the state level would, people would be laughing about somebody saying that's too dense. We're convinced that the balancing test is in our favor, that we can't move it 5 feet in, because we asked Thad, and we asked the engineers to look at that. Carlos looked at it with his team. That's what we got, okay? So you could say
Yeah.
move it in 6 inches and we wrestle with it. We can't.
And
this is the plan.
And, Mr. Chairman, through you, the issue, though, is that in the event that if you were required to adhere to the setback, to the 25-foot setback, and you assert that that would render the project uneconomic, then that would trigger the pro forma review process. Because certainly what you're saying, Mr. Engler, is true, that in the event that the board concludes that you are correct, that it would render the project uneconomic to do what they're asking, then they would need to have a local concern in order to justify staying with that condition that outweighs the regional need for affordable housing. No question that you're correct about that. But for the board to get to that place, it would need that asks for the pro formas to be compared so that they can make a determination, as your burden of proof, to show that compliance with what they're talking about, the extra 5 feet of buffer, to comply with the setback, that would indeed render the project uneconomic. I think that's what you're asking.
It is.
Well, how do you answer the question when the hearing is over? How do you do a pro forma review?
Well, when you look at the rules very specifically provide that the board cannot ask for pro forma review
Correct.
until the consultant review is done and until the back and forth between the board and the applicant concludes. And certainly, at the last session, there continued to be the back and forth, and this evening, I understand that the board is being told that the applicant has made a good faith and its last effort to show what it is that it can do, that you're at an end point. Once that end point is reached, the rules are clear that there is the ability, if the board continues to insist upon a particular condition, which as to Lot 4A would be the additional 5 feet of buffering to comply with the 25-foot
Well, not only-
setback. Well, I'm just giving
Not
this as an
only 4A,
example.
yeah.
I'm just giving that one as an example.
Well, you can put that in as a condition, and we can appeal it. We don't have to sit here and say, we're gonna run a pro forma and show you a new plan. That's our prerogative. We don't have to stay and do that kind of pro forma.
Well, and-
We talked about at the last hearing about 8 units and all of it. We don't have to do that if we don't choose to do it. We can appeal it.
Well, certainly, the rules provide that in the event that the board gets to an endpoint with the applicant with regard to a condition that's asked for, and the applicant comes back and says, this is the best we can do, and if the board says, here are conditions that we're insisting upon, and if you say it renders the project uneconomic, the rules trigger the pro forma review process. And if you come to that point, at the end of the 6 months, or at the end of an extension of 7 months, or 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, at that point, in my opinion, and it's my advice to this board, that the board has the ability to request the pro forma process to be undertaken. And certainly, you and I have had this issue before, very recently, and as you know, the first thing I did, because you did not give the pro forma review in that case, or the money to have the pro formas reviewed, at the conference of council, when it was appealed, I moved for summary disposition on behalf of the town. And then 2 years later, after mediation, we did settle it. But that would be the same approach here. The case law is very clear. The SJC, decades ago, when 40B was new, said very specifically and loudly, hasn't said it many times since, but said very loudly, that this process is important. And everything has to be presented under the rules to this board. And yes, you have the ability to go to the HAC if you're dissatisfied, and if the rules provide for an appeal to go to the HAC. But when you get to the HAC, while there is a de novo review, it is not a review that is taken so anew that it's because you ignored what the board asked for. It's not, you cannot bypass what this board asks for and then go to the HAC and say, well, let's talk about it here. That is not an appropriate process, and the SJC has so ruled.
Well, I don't agree 100% with what you just said, because what you're not talking about is the regulations were very clear that they established a 6-month period, so it wouldn't go on for a year and a half as they used to go on when I've been doing this now for 35 years or 40 years. There is an end process, and it's up to the board to know that end process and to realize if there's going to be a pro forma review to call for it before they get to the end process, which is now a month after the end process. So they didn't get to the opportunity to raise that question. We think the hearing should be closed, and that's our prerogative not to extend to do a pro forma review.
And
We're not troubled by the pro forma review. Believe me, we think the